Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Please be seated.
Too young, though, right? Too young.
Welcome all. We'll welcome everybody that's in the gallery and those that are tuning in. If we've got anybody watching us instead of the Olympics, I'm not sure if I can promise that we'll be as elegant as the ice dancing or as exhilarating as the ski jumping, but hopefully we at least get to the finish line. So with that, first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present with the exception of Councillor Chaboyer, Councillor Harwood, and Councillor Lareggio.
Thank you. And all the missing councillors are all on this side. You fellows over here can feel kind of lonely. Next item, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
Councillor Fawcett, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any changes or omissions? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Confirmation of the minutes of the regular meeting held February 5th.
Again, moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Cullen. Again, any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of delegations, Your Worship, a presentation from Erica Lesage regarding an insurance expense reimbursement.
Very good. Welcome and come ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Erica, and this is my husband, Mike Lesage. We would like to take this opportunity, Mayor and Council, to present our side of the story from start to finish of events that took place at our house on our property. And on that note, we will begin. On October 5th, I was doing laundry and noticed that the toilet was gurgling and the bowl had drained. We called a plumber to come and have a look as we were concerned there was a block in the line and didn't want to have anything start backing up on us. On Sunday, October 8th, the plumber came and snaked the line. He got about 100 feet and couldn't get the line out any further. He pulled it out and it came back with mud and gravel. His assessment was that we likely had a break in the line and suggested, as far out as he got with his equipment, that we call the city and get a camera down there to see what's going on and whose property the issue is on. My husband placed a call to the city and talked to the on-call worker and arranged a time for them to come Tuesday the 10th in the morning. The city came that morning and put the camera down the pipe. It was determined that there was a low spot where solids were collecting, and that was affecting the flow through the pipes and what was causing our issue. It was also determined that it was on city property. He said to me that it wasn't a top priority, but he wasn't happy with the situation we were in and that he would recommend that the city does not sit on this too long, as it is a family home, and if it was left for a long period of time, it's only going to get worse. We were told we could carry on with our normal routines and to notify the city if anything changed. I was informed that we would receive notification when they would be able to fix it, or if the city had a free day, the crew might just show up. On October 18th, the sewer crew showed up to fix the repair. There is a tree on city property in the front of 13 Acadia that needed to be removed before they could start the job. So they left and the Parks Department showed up to remove the tree. This was a day where there were 90 km/h winds, and in our opinion, not ideal conditions to be cutting down a tree. My husband received a call that the sewer crew had showed up, but because the tree needed to be removed, they could not start the work, so when we got home, there would be no tree left in the front, and they would return at a later date to do their work. My husband phoned me at around 3 p.m. to let me know that had happened. At approximately 3:20, I received a call from my neighbor that the tree had been removed, but in the process, hydraulic oil had been sprayed all over our homes and property, and there was a note left on the door with a number to call. I left work and went home to call the number, but no one had answered, so I left a message and took photos of the damage. On the morning of Thursday the 19th, the Risk Management Department, Corey from JDS Adjusters, and the equipment operators from the day before were at the house. My neighbor messaged me that everyone was there, so I might want to come home to talk and find out what the next steps were to getting this all cleaned up. It was recommended that I submit my claim to the Risk Management Department as well as get in touch with my home insurance to get a claim going with them. Tyler Pearson, who said he was the one operating the equipment, also came up to Mike, my neighbor, and myself and personally apologized. He told us, insurance issues aside, he just wanted to apologize for what had happened. He went on to explain that there are couplings on the front of the equipment. When they went to clamp down on the branches, the wind blew the hydraulic hose into the clamp, severing the hose. In their minds, the equipment was no longer functional, and they needed to get the branches out. When they opened the equipment, the hydraulic oil started to spray everywhere due to the release and pressure and combination of the wind, and at that point, there was nothing they could do to stop it. I called my husband to let him know what happened and returned to work. That afternoon, I got in contact with my insurance company to open a claim and informed them what had happened. They strongly recommended that we contact the city and not go through our house insurance, as the city is 100% at fault and it would have a negative effect on our policy. I also emailed the risk management department a list of what damage we could see to get a claim going with the city as well. Our insurance company had an adjuster named Mike come out the following day on the 20th to have a look at things. They also suggested some restoration companies to get in contact with to get a quote for fixing the damage and getting things cleaned up. On the morning of the 20th, I also called the risk management department to follow up with what happens once our claim is submitted. She said she had received our claim and it had been sent off to Corey at JDS, and she provided me with his contact info and said he would be able to answer my questions or let me know who to get in touch with. I called and was informed that he was out on claims and left a message. On Monday the 23rd, I went into his office to talk to him about what his thoughts of the assessment he did was. He said he was there on behalf of the city for environmental reasons and not to assess the damage. He also suggested to get in touch with our insurance company and that there was no one from the city that we could talk to. They wouldn't deal with us directly and that everything would have to go through insurance companies on both sides. We contacted Corey from Kankade Restoration, and on Monday the 23rd, he came to look in the morning at the damages. That afternoon, a Kankade employee came to clean a small area as a test to see if the oil could be removed. Within 24 hours, the spots started to show back through. On Thursday the 26th, I contacted Corey to see where things were at, and he told me he was working on a quote and would be getting it off to me and the insurance company shortly. As it stands, we currently have a quote from Kankade for $3,000 to clean, repaint, and reseal everything. This situation has cost us time away from work and hours spent working on insurance claims and documentation. We are a young family with a 2-year-old and a second child due in August. The fact of the matter is, this was a city issue being fixed on city property with city equipment by city employees. It is extremely frustrating to think that we should have any money come out of our pockets and to have to spend more time fighting to get this cleaned up. It's not like we're asking you to take care of a mess we made. We're asking you to take care of a mess you made.
Well, that was very well done. Thank you very much. I presume you'd be okay with if any councillors have any questions to ask you? Yeah, again, you can relax, although I'm a little nervous too, so don't feel bad. So I will open the floor if there are any questions from council. But isn't always questions, but just in the event there are. Councillor Barry.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through you, the presenters. Erica, if you wouldn't mind, can you disclose to us what your deductible is in your house insurance policy? What would you be out of pocket?
Our deductible is $1,000.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Just to give you a bit of a heads up, you've probably been made aware, council doesn't normally make decisions on matters like this sort of right kind of here and now. We sort of take in the information and then get responses from the administration and the like. So then you may hear a motion that the matter was received. That's just sort of the formal process that we have to kind of take in information. So I just want you to be aware of that. So if there's not any further questions, I thank you very much for coming and being so thorough with your story. Good. Thank you. It's council's wish. Councillor Barry.
Your Worship, I'd like to move the motion that the presentation by Eclissage with respect to reimbursement of insurance expenses be received and a report given back to council within 1 month. possible resolution of payment, and hopefully some discussion with the insurance companies, because I think everybody's involved in this. It's not just the city. I think there's some discussions with the insurance companies as well that needs to take place, so.
We in your motion with the report to come back within
Yes.
1 month?
Thank you, yes.
The rest of it, sure. Okay, seconded by Councillor Cullen. Okay, although you can elaborate some more, but mover can speak if you like.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. I do appreciate Eric and her husband coming out tonight and presenting. As I said before in our informal meeting, we need to hear both sides of the story. And now you've heard the other side of the story, or you've probably heard some things that we didn't hear in our informal meeting. And I think they were important for council to know. Here's a young couple that's, like most young couples with a young family, trying to make ends meet. And this was an accident. It's nobody's fault. We're not trying to look for blame. We're not trying to hang anybody. It was an accident. And the difference is what I'm trying to understand, is the difference between liability and responsibility seems to be a very fine line, because this was never intended to happen, but it was our responsibility that it did happen. Right from the equipment to the actions of the operators to the damage that was done was all the responsibility of the city. But because there was no malice, because there was no intent, we're deemed to be not at fault. And I don't totally agree with that, because I think morally we have to seek some responsibility in this matter and maybe help out this couple through this financial. I mean, $1,000 deductible is pretty steep. Most people don't have $1,000 deductible in their house, so right off the top, that's pretty steep for a young couple. They'll probably lose their claims-free percentage on their coverage, which will amount probably to another, over the year's time, anywhere from $800 to $1,000 as well. So, again, for something that wasn't their fault at all, and you're going to probably hear from another neighbor tonight, right off the hop, they're probably looking at $2,000 out of their pocket over the course of time for an accident that really was responsibility of city crews. I mean, again, it was an accident, but where does the responsibility lie? I think we have to accept that responsibility on behalf of the city. So,
Seconder wish to speak?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Berry has covered everything I was going to say.
Very good. Any other discussion? If not, if motion passes, we'll be sending it back to administration for the report back to council within a month. I'm going to call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. And next item, please.
Community question period, Your Worship.
Good. Community question period is a portion on our agenda that council holds open to any individual wanting to speak to council about any item that's on the agenda, and a total of 15 minutes is allowed for question period. So the floor is open now to anybody that has business with us. Okay, not seeing any. We can move on to the next item, please.
Committee reports, Your Worship.
Okay, we aren't aware of any formal reports, but sometimes there's verbal ones that pop up. Any this evening? Seeing none, on to the next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
Very good. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. During our budget deliberations last month, we talked a lot about the drug and addictions problems facing a number of residents in our city. So I would just like an update from administration on what actions are taking place along with other government and community partners.
Very good. And Mr. Sage, I think, has a fairly comprehensive response ready for you.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Patterson. During the 2018 budget deliberations, City Council allocated additional funding for resources to address this growing issue in our community. The Brandon Police Service received additional funding for officers to focus on restricting illegal drugs from entering our community. As the police chief indicated during his presentation, BPS officers are also adding additional resources targeted at curtailing human exploitation, especially with respect to young people in our community. Along with this initiative, the Brandon Police Service continues to support our community mobilization hub, whose goal is to reach individuals or families at acutely elevated risk in our community and connect them to supports and services before the situation escalates or a tragedy occurs. Currently sitting at the community mobilization table are the following agencies: Brandon Police Service, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Brandon School Division, Child and Family Services of Western Manitoba, Dakota Ojibwe Child and Family Service, Prairie Mountain Health, Probation Services, Brandon Correctional Center, Westman Family Services, and the Brandon Friendship Center. City Council also included $25,000 in the team budget for the mayor's proposed initiative related to youth addiction prevention. The mayor is engaging with the school.
Very good. And I don't think we're aware of any others, but sometimes inquiries arise throughout the day. And not seeing any, so we can move on to the next item, please.
The order of announcements, Your Worship.
Announcements this evening. Right, bunch. I gather you're normally showing off for Councillor Moreggio and Harwood. Oh boy. Very good. We can move on to the next item, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, the Municipal Development and Services Agreement between the City of Brandon and Gambler First Nation.
Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship. The City of Brandon enter into a municipal development and service agreement with Gambler First Nation to set out the terms and conditions for the First Nation's purchase of municipal services from the city to service land at 1725 18th Street North and 1655 Clare Avenue, whereby the terms and conditions shall include, and I think I will read through these, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
It'll take a minute. That the city will provide services to the First Nation to the same extent and standards as such services provided to similar lands within the city. 2, that the agreement begins as soon as the lands are set apart as reserve. 3, that the agreement reflect the city's desire to enjoy a long-term relationship with the First Nation that can only be terminated by mutual agreement or as a conclusion of a comprehensive dispute resolution process. 4, that the First Nation and the city will respect each other's laws within its boundaries. 5, that the use of the First Nations land will respect the city zoning bylaw and North Gateway Secondary Plan. 6, that all activities, persons, and things on the First Nations lands must conform to all city requirements. 7, that non-compliance with city requirements would result in dispute resolution and, without resolution, withdrawal of city services except emergency services. 8, that development of the land is subject to the city's development review process and development charge. In 2018, that's $1.95 or 93 square foot for commercial, $2,119 per resident, $2,190 per residence, subject to annual increases to the construction price index. 9, that the city will construct Clare Avenue at a time that aligns with the First Nations project phasing. 10, that the First Nation undertake all construction on the land in accordance with the regular building permit process. 11, that the standards of city services to the First Nations land are to the same standard of services as similar to city taxpayers. 12, that the First Nations will pay a general service fee to the city, the equivalent of property taxes, less the amount of services that the First Nation is unable to purchase. Example, governance, finance, HR, etc. 13, that the First Nations will pay specific service fees to the city, the same as other users of city fee-based services. And 14, that a thorough communication, consultation, and dispute resolution process is set forth in the agreement that supports the relationship between the city and the First Nations over time.
Have a seconder on that, please. Councillor Patterson. So that was fairly lengthy, but would the mover like to speak?
So through your worship, I believe there may be a presentation that we could look at for this.
That's very good. Call forward Jacqueline East, our General Manager of Development Services, who has worked long and hard on this, I will be the first to say.
Your Worship, it couldn't be a better project to work along and hard on. So. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll note if there are questions at the end. We have our Aboriginal Community Coordinator, Jason Gobai, here as well, who would be pleased to make some remarks about the process at the end if you wish. So I just want to quickly run through how we got to here tonight. There are not many slides, so this won't take long. My first point is just to explain what a municipal development and service agreement is. It is the agreement that we are required to enter into between a First Nation and a municipality, and it's when the First Nation wishes to purchase services from the municipality. It's a requirement of their process through the federal government that we do this. The picture that I put up there is just an example of an early 2016 agreement that was executed between the mayor of
Swan River.
Hitting
of Headingley and the chief of Rolling River. Sorry, Mayor Tayuhi will not be thrilled that I missed his name. This process actually started for us in 2016, and several of council and the staff, we all participated in some training on doing business with First Nations. And as a result of that, after that training, what Your Worship, yourself, and Chief Ledoux actually entered into an agreement, a memorandum of understanding that set forth a protocol about how we would negotiate and what we would negotiate about. So it was actually late last year that we really started, everyone came together in the Ted Snur room at our A.R. McDermott building, and we really got to the end of that negotiation. We just began putting the different ideas together. So the rest of this just really marches through those what the chief and the mayor had determined that we wanted to, we were directed to negotiate on, and tells you how we agreed to the different principles. So one of the most fundamental pieces of the agreement is a principle that the First Nation, Gambler First Nation, insisted in all ways. They wanted to not be treated any more, any less than anyone else. They really wanted their community, as it may arise on these lands that are now within the city of Brandon, to be the same as everybody else. So that was that principle underlies everything else. So if you wanted to sort of, I think that's one of the most important things. The agreement term and termination was something that we had to agree upon. Everyone agreed that the most important thing is that this was to be a long-term relationship. It will begin when the land is set apart as reserve, and there are certain ways built in that it can be terminated by mutual agreement or at the conclusion of a dispute resolution process. But even then, that would just require another agreement if they were to still the First Nation still wishes to use municipal services. So the thinking behind this that is set forth in the agreement is that it's a very long-term relationship. Jurisdiction was a really big part of the agreement, and the basic point of it is we really have to respect that each of us has a different jurisdiction. As City of Brandon, we're simply a municipality, and we get our authority from the province of Manitoba. The Gambler First Nation, of course, is subject to, gets their authority from the Government of Canada. So very different governments and very different sets of authority, and there's a lot of work to understand the differences and how we're going to work together with those. The use of the land was important to talk about, and right up front, Gambler First Nation was absolutely pleased with the zoning as it is on the land, which is commercial arterial zoning. So they are happy to develop their land with all of the uses that are listed in that zoning. And they are also pleased to be part of the North Gateway neighborhood. And there is a secondary plan on that neighborhood that describes how the land should be developed going forward. So everyone agrees that that is how the development philosophically will proceed into the future. An important premise in the agreement is this idea of city requirements. It's used throughout the entire agreement. And what it is that the Gambler First Nation agrees to meet all city requirements. And city requirements are all of our bylaws, all of our policies, all of the ways that we do business. So they actually want to completely sort of have a seamless community here with their nation as well as the City of Brandon, and one of the ways is they would like our city requirements to apply on their land. So the activities on the land then, the Gambler First Nation, as well as complying with all the city requirements, we had to talk about what if there is non-compliance, what do we do, and therefore there's dispute resolution processes, and then what happens at the time when the First Nation actually brings their own laws onto the land, and when they do that, they would be subject to additional consultation between the First Nation and the city. to make sure everything is compatible. We talked about development, how the land will be developed. And so this is actually an image that shows where the land is on the northeast corner of 18th Street North and Clare Avenue. Gambler is pleased to meet exactly the same requirements as a developer in Brandon would do. Developers in Brandon have to meet an extensive list of development submission requirements to make sure that we have all the information to process through engineering and public works, et cetera, to make sure everything works. And so Gambler will have to, has agreed to also provide us the information required in that document. Is actually attached, would be attached to the agreement itself. The land would be subject to the development charge as it has been drafted right now. So right now, we haven't adopted it yet at the city, but they have agreed that they would pay that amount, which is $1.93 per square foot of commercial, and or $2,190 per residence. And the agreement goes further to say that at such time in the future as we may have an actual development charge bylaw, they would then comply with that. But for the purpose of this agreement, we're using those, they've agreed that those numbers are the fair contribution. Part of that also is that they will pay an off-site contribution toward infrastructure in the North Gateway area, and the city then would construct Clare, and that we would construct that aligning with their project phasing. And if they want to go sooner, they could construct Clare sooner, which is the same as would happen with other developments in the city. Construction on the land, when they actually begin to construct, they have asked for and purchased our inspection and building processes from the City of Brandon. So they will go through our regular building and development permitting processes. They have to, in any case, meet all building, plumbing, fire code, and all city bylaws with respect to construction and standards of service. And this can be anything from the frequency of us snow plowing to different animal control bylaws, anything that we have that we offer as a service. Our standards to Gambler are the same standards as we are to similar taxpayers. So in this case, largely a commercial property in that kind of location, the services will be no different. And if there's any change to the service, what they want or what we can deliver, it simply pops into a consultation and review process. So then I just put a slide here just to try to explain simply how Gambler would never, of course, pay taxes to Brandon. They will have their own tax laws and their own taxation, but they will pay a fee for all of these services that they're purchasing from the City of Brandon. And so their fee in total adds up to two parts. One we're calling a general service charge, and the other one is a specific service charge. And so if you just think about the general service charge is kind of like the taxes we would each pay as a taxpayer in Brandon, and the specific service charge are the user fees that we would otherwise pay, whether that was to the sportsplex or a tipping fee at the landfill and that sort of thing. So just to clarify one more time, the general service charge, we use exactly the same numbers that we use for everyone else in calculating what that charge would be. It will represent sort of the tax part of what we as taxpayers pay. We share with Gambler a calculation to come up with our assessment value. We actually use the province of Manitoba's portioned value in the formula, and then the city's mill rate would be applied. And the First Nation will actually pay for all of the services delivered, the same as other city taxpayers. They don't get as many services as other city taxpayers, so there was a consideration of that, but that's the calculation, how the calculation for the general service charge is made in the agreement. And the specific service charge, as I mentioned before, is just very specific. It's the same as everyone else. They'll get water bills, permit fees, tipping fees, recreation fees. If we do have local improvements on the land or special service levies, that would all be the same as if it was any other land. So those two added together equal the full charge that we would be billing to Gambler First Nation on an annual basis. Just to remind everyone, I talked about the dispute resolution or communication. The agreement, the draft agreement that we have, the term that we have in there now includes this comprehensive communication program. So there's pieces that involve ongoing communication, how we're going to appoint representatives from each, and we're going to have regular meetings, regular communications as we have had, and have something more formal annually to talk about our plans and aspirations and that sort of thing. We also, that's the annual review and planning, which is the second step. We also have a council and rotation review. So if there's ever anything that we're changing, how we're impacting each other, there's a consultation review process. And that's really notifying each other, getting together, talking about the issue, and when we're trying to make sure that we're all on the same page. If we go through all of that and we don't agree, there is a dispute resolution process, and which may go through mediation if necessary, and then ultimately there's a very small handful of items that may go to arbitration if we just can't agree. So that's built into the agreement as it stands. The last point would be the agreement, of course, had to deal with liability. So just letting you know that the liability in the agreement just says that our liability is exactly the same as the fullest extent that we can possibly have liability under our legislation. So we've nothing different than it is for anyone else or any other property owner. And I think that should summarize everything if there's any questions.
Very good. That was very thorough. I know it's been a long and very involved process, so there's certainly a lot to cover there. Any questions? Any member of council? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the agreement, there's a mention of that the First Nation will pay a fee to the city, the equivalent of property taxes, less the amount for services that they're unable to purchase. Could you just expand a little bit on this notion of services that they're unable to purchase and
Sure.
sort of what that means?
Sure, and this has been, thank you for asking that question. It's been a learning process for all of us. But of course, Gambler First Nation has its own government. They have their own council. They have their own human resources, their own finance. So all of those kinds of services, we couldn't, they wouldn't buy from us, or we couldn't provide to them. So their own elections, that's all kind of a governance type of service that they will have to have in their own taxation laws, and so that we deduct that from what we would pay, because in our taxation we pay for all of that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm going to ask this question because it will be asked of people, so I just want to get it out there. I can answer it myself if you want to, but does this mean that Gambler First Nation could build a casino on the land?
Oh, a good question. Thanks for asking that one. The Gambler has agreed to the list of uses that are in the commercial arterial zoning categories, and they do not include a casino. The list of uses include typical things that would be in our commercial establishments that you would see on 18th Street, that you could see VLTs, you could see a bingo hall, but there's a casino is not a listed use, and in any case, that kind of facility would be a provincial review and consideration.
Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Jackie. The land zoned, you said commercial right now as it is. It's being sold by a private person, private developer and that. But in order for this project to go forward, is there a rezoning that has to come back to council? Does the land have to be rezoned at all for urban reserve? Does it have to come back to council for reading?
Through your worship to Councillor Berry, no, the land already has its zoning in our perspective, and as soon as the land takes reserve status, it will no longer have any zoning. It will be land that belongs to another government. So it won't be our land, so it won't have our zoning. That's why it was very important in the municipal development and service agreement that we agreed to that list of uses, and they further actually agreed that they would comply with the considerations in our bylaws. So even though our bylaws don't apply, they've agreed in the agreement that they would comply with our requirements.
Okay, Councillor Cullen.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Jackie. One of the questions that I have that just sort of triggered is it's zoned commercial at this time. It's privately owned by someone else right at this time. So it isn't the city of Brandon selling the land, it's a private owner selling the land as it is. And now, but I notice in the municipal agreement, as far as development charges, we've also covered off residential components. So if you wouldn't mind just sort of touching on that, because you're saying, okay, it's commercial, but there's a residential reference in here to building residences.
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen, yes, our commercial zoning districts actually include the possibility of residential. We have built zoning bylaws that are very mixed use, and so that is a possibility. We don't know that will ever come to pass, but it is included in the list of uses that we agree make sense on the land.
So again, just sort of to follow up on that, in some of our downtown projects, we have commercial on the lower floor and residential upstairs, those kind of things. So that's a possibility within this piece.
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen, yes, that's the mixed use or some residential is absolutely possible in this commercial zoning, as it would be for the current, the former landowner or any landowner with that zoning. It would not be different.
One last sort of reference, sort of explain to me, like when it comes down to urban reserve or urban land or reserve land, the title's actually connected with the federal government. How is the relationship with the City of Brandon, the federal government, and First Nations? How does that, like, if you wouldn't mind squaring that with my mind? I mean, this might be a big one, but...
Okay. Through your worship to Councillor Cullen, I'm going to try my best. It's complicated. The land, my understanding, and I'm looking at material from the Indian Act, and that the legal title to reserve land actually remains is held by the Crown. And it's a business between the federal government and the First Nation that they see the First Nation then has the recognized interest in the reserve land that is exclusive right to do and govern that land. It's far more complicated than that, so I certainly don't mean to simplify the complexities of how we've gotten to where we are with the Indian Act by that comment, but we're not part of that business in any case. It's our relationship here is between us as a municipality using our authority under the province, entering into an agreement with a First Nation because they need to have some municipal services in order to do govern the land as they wish to do so. So ours is a very small part of the much bigger picture of what's being established.
Well, the federal government has set up a framework in the country where First Nations may create urban economic development zones or urban reserves, but a requirement or a condition by the part of the federal government before they grant those is that they ask the First Nation to have a municipal services agreement with the host municipality. In this case, it's us, and that's a condition of the First Nation getting it granted reserve status. So this is sort of step one in the process before the federal government would grant them but they'll still, in essence, hold title to it. The Crown continues to hold title, but the agreement certainly is between us and the First Nation. Okay, and Councillor Parker next.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chiarki. I just wondered if you could touch again, please, on the agreement term and termination. What would cause termination of this agreement? What type of situation may cause a termination?
Through your worship to Councillor Parker, I don't think that between our conversations between us at the city and our friends at Gambler First Nation, I don't think that we could have even imagined a situation that would terminate this agreement. We all are believing this is a long-term, indefinite relationship that we want to have with the First Nation. But I suppose if there was some way that the First Nation was able to begin providing their own services, they will create their own laws. Maybe there will be a time when they can create some of their own, or find another way to service their land without needing the municipality to completely service their land. Well, that could result in a termination of this agreement. Having said that, the agreement still goes on to say we would just have to enter into a different kind of agreement, because in any case there will always be a basic amount of service that we will have to agree on. For example, street access.
And just more, is there an initial, is this a 5-year, 10-year, 50-year? Is there any time frame on it at all, or is it just, that's not...
Yeah, no, through your worship to Councillor Parker, there is no time rate. This is a long-term, indefinite agreement that just has a provision about how we would entertain a termination, which is essentially would be some kind of a change or an evolution of this agreement in some time in the future. And with everyone around the table, I would have to say it's a legal piece that's in there to make sure we're each, or the First Nation or municipality, are looking after future generations, because we can't see a reason that this would terminate in any particular time frame.
Okay, no other hands up? Oh, Councillor Fawcett, sorry.
Yeah, thank you again, through your worship. Sort of waiting for a second round. Could I ask, does the city of Brandon have any other agreements in the city, like service agreements with different places? We were talking about just a different level of government. Does the province owns land inside the city of Brandon? Does the federal government own land already existing in the city of Brandon? And do we have agreements with them on things? Or I'm just, I'm kind of putting you a little bit on the spot. It's nice when I ask these questions prior so you can be brief, but I'm just curious, because I do know like there's the college, that's, I believe, provincial property.
Well, in a nutshell, junior level of government doesn't have the authority to tax the senior levels of government, so then they sort of have, just so we don't have to do these one at a time. I mean, there's sort of a blanket arrangement between the province and the federal governments and municipalities across the province or across the country, where those levels of government pay to municipalities what they call a grant in lieu of taxes. So they pay, unlike gamblers prepared to do, they pay a number that resembles the taxes they would have paid if they were a regular taxpayer. And that's paid, in this case, it'll be a sort of a fee, and in the case of the other governments, we call it a grant in lieu of the taxes that their buildings and properties occupy. Yes. So it's kind of going down a good road, Councillor Fawcett. Maybe that was what you intended to. This is a sort of a similar. We are dealing with a different nation, so that property becomes a. The property of a different level of government, a different order of government. So that's why there's a little different arrangement than we would have with just some other standard development. So.
Yeah, and that, through your worship, that was sort of where I was going. He says this isn't really unheard of. We have agreements with other levels of government, and this is just a fourth different level of government outside of municipal, federal, and provincial that we haven't had an agreement with, and now we will. It's not unheard of across the country, the province, or even internally here. Just this is the first time
for Brandon. Yeah, and it's good. I was going to make several comments, but one of them on this theme. We've had a fabulous relationship, a fabulous process with Gambler First Nation. They're very progressive. Good people to deal with and whatnot, but it is, as you said, our first one. Now we're not blazing trail throughout the country. There's many of these throughout the country. There's quite a few of them throughout the province. Certainly it's the first time Brandon's been approached by a First Nation. We wanted to do it right, set up a template that was, very positive, very welcoming, but would also be a template that, could be, more easily used if we have, are approached by other First Nations that want to set up business in Brandon. So certainly that's probably why it took a little longer, but as a result, I think it's coming across, very positive. The rapport that's been built has been tremendous, but certainly I could speak to it a little more later, but we'll get through the speakers. I didn't have any other hands up yet, but thanks again, Jackie, for very thorough presentation tonight and for probably in excess of a year-long work on your part. I know that Jason from Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council has been very helpful. He's in the audience. A great many other. I know the city treasurer has been quite involved, city manager, and quite a long list of our personnel. So it's been a great process. So back to the main motion. You had the floor before we brought up the presenter, Councillor Fawcett. If you wish to continue to speak.
Through your worship, I don't have a whole lot more to say. I think that we have talked about this publicly for a while, and I have had an opportunity to speak with a small group up in Monterey Estates, which is the residents closest to it, and I was very grateful to find out the people were very understanding of the group that I was able to speak to, which is, I don't know what they don't really have a board up there. I can't recall what they call that group. And other than that, it's one of those areas that as people drive through the city, unless it's identified, it's just another commercial development going on in the city, and it's always good to see commercial developments in the city. I look forward to seeing the start of things to come up there.
Very good. Seconder was Councillor Patterson. Seconder wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I think this is a important day in the history of the city of Brandon. I think we've heard since the report on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out, we've heard that local governments are on the front lines of reconciliation. And as a city, we do have, the space. This is, as an urban center, we are an opportunity for First Nations that traditionally have been pushed out of urban centers and into more rural and remote places to build economic opportunities, economic development, housing, and not be pushed off to the side anymore. And so I think that as a council, we should really be proud of the work of yourself, Your Worship, along with city administration, to ensure that this is a respectful process and that we came to a conclusion that I think benefits both governments. So I'm just really excited to be part of a council that is moving forward on this, that really is a modern day council in Canada, I would say, and I just look forward to hopefully developing more positive relationships with more First Nations in the coming years.
Other speakers? Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through your worship. I too am in favor of this, and as you know, we're talking about it as an economic opportunity, and it certainly is for Gambler and for the city of Brandon. But hopefully more than that comes out of this, and that this results in improved housing and social outcomes for the community and for the residents of Gambler First Nation, and that the First Nation and Council do indeed consider their fiduciary responsibility to their members of their First Nation. They take that to heart, and that this results in employment opportunities and better health outcomes. And so I'm definitely in favor of this, provided that it meets those expectations.
Good. Didn't see any other hands up at the moment. Just to echo some of the other things that were said, and at the risk of repeating what I might have said earlier, this is a very significant agreement. We certainly see a lot of developments come across our council desk here, and this isn't just another one of them. It certainly is, and yet very significant in the sense that our first opportunity to collaborate with the First Nation that came forward and is prepared to invest in our community. And I'm also very proud of this council that really right from the get-go, everyone was very on board and welcoming to this First Nation. And it's probably telling a little story out of school, but I will say it anyways. The very first meeting that we had with Gambler, and the chief and some councillors had come, and they happened to have their lawyer along that helped them all through the process, and we opened the meeting with, I guess, sort of common speeches, if you want to call it that, and mine was very welcoming, with the support of our council, that we really were anxious to make this work and to welcome their economic development into our community, and words to that effect. To which the lawyer sort of closed up his book and kind of said, okay, I've got to sort of rewrite our approach. He's worked with lots of different First Nations across the country, and it usually starts off in a bit of a confrontational point of view, and that's kind of the lens that he's used to working under, and was quite pleased and surprised to have a municipality that was certainly more open and welcoming, and he had to sort of change his playbook, which really sort of started us off on a very good foot. So again, I think Brandon can be very proud of being so welcoming and progressive with this First Nation. They're extremely good and progressive people. And I might add, and Jason might have to help me out here if I get this wrong, that the name Gambler may kind of confuse a few people, that it may relate to gambling, and it does not. It's named after a man whose name was Gambler, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Jason? Those that are concerned about gambling, the fact that they're called Gambler First Nation has nothing to do with gambling. So that is kind of a fun fact I thought I would throw in. So I don't see any other speakers, so with that I'm going to invite the mover to close if he likes.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We've really discussed this in full, and it is nice to sort of get a bit closer to a conclusion for this. So,
very good. And for Council's information, although it's taken us a little longer than expected, there's a lot of bureaucracy that has to be worked through with First Nation provisions. So it's taken a little while. So we've got to this, but this is not the finish line. This is one finish line, and this now allows Gambler First Nation to now proceed to the federal government to ask for the reserve status. The municipal service agreement is a requirement before they can do so. So by concluding this, then that takes them on to the next step. You're not going to see shovels in the ground just sort of immediately. They've got to get through the federal balance of federal hurdles, which we don't anticipate being an issue given our very positive agreement here. But we're on to the next phase. So I'm going to call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Consideration of the proposal for the E911 call taking solution. Excuse me.
Very good. Motion would be in order, please. Councillor Fawcett.
thank you, through your worship, that the proposal for Solacom Technologies for a replacement call-taking solution for the City of Brandon Enhanced 911 Call Center in the amount of $281,336.04 exclusive of GST be accepted.
Very good. Seconder, please. Councillor Patterson. Mover wish to speak.
Thank you, through your worship. Maybe see if you can have someone in. Someone was excited to come up and talk about this, so I'd like to hear from them. You could.
Item. Welcome, Mr. Hammond.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. So to give some background on this proposal, So the City of Brandon operates the Provincial 911 call center on the second floor of the Fire Hall on 19th Street North. We contract with the vast majority of municipalities, cities, and some First Nations in all of the province outside of the perimeter of Winnipeg to provide E911 services. So the proposal that's before you tonight is for software which essentially allows us to perform the enhanced or the E911 function. So if you can imagine way back when a caller called into 911, there was no location services. You didn't even get a number. You didn't know where they were calling from. Basically what this software does is it provides caller information. It provides us with the number. If it's from a landline, it gives us the address of where the caller is calling from. If the caller is calling from a cell phone, it gives us location services. So that's very handy. If you can imagine someone from out of province traveling down the Trans-Canada Highway, they have an accident. They may not necessarily know where they are, but when they call 911, we know where they are. And also another important function with this software is it allows us to do caller ringback. So if someone phones 911, there's been an incident, even if no one speaks, once again, we know where they are. We have the ability to call back to the phone that they called from. So in our operation, this software is very important. We've done what I believe is a very fair and open tendering process for this proposal, and in this case Solacom, who is a Canadian company, was the successful proponent. They had the best overall proposal, and coincidentally the best implementation price as well.
I got some speakers already, so the mover, Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Mr. Hammond, I do know we need this. We had it in our capital budget for this, and actually it's coming in under what we had, good sign. But I do want to just question, I know that we assess these things thoroughly, but of the three applicants, the three vendors that it put in, it's notably below. So we would have vetted everything to say, at this price, we're getting the same as what the others were sort of saying, because it is significantly, this is large numbers to begin with, $281,000, but it's significantly lower than the other vendors. So we just want to make sure that we're 100%, we're getting what we need.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, just to explain the process a bit, in the report you'll note there was actually 5 vendors that submitted proposal. It was a 2-stage process. We did an initial round of where we evaluated all of the proposal, and we shortlisted the 3 that are on the report. And part of that criteria was price, but of course part of the criteria was what we believe to be the performance that we would get out of the end product and how it would match the services we provide and what we need to do in our center. So 5 proposals were received, 3 were shortlisted. And yes, at the end of the day, we had a very thorough evaluation team consisting of members from procurement, information technology, as well as the call center itself. And yes, all of the proposals were very thoroughly evaluated. And at the end of the day, this is what we believe to be the best vendor that can provide the best service, coincidentally at the best price.
Good.
Yeah, thank you again, through your worship. Yeah, and that's great. I just want everybody to make sure that we do know that, because we did approve a $500,000 budget for this project. So what we're looking at with the contract or whatever with Solacom is $281,336.04. There is additional costs, so the whole project should come out to about $344,000, which is great because that's nicely in our budget. And I assume those additional costs would have come up even with the others, because they're outside of our initial budget. We've been looking for more money. So it looks like a pretty good situation for us. It looks like got a good opportunity here.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, yes, I mean all of the costs at the end of the day were considered in the proposal. So in order, yes, at the end of the day, Solacom, the winning overall price and what we feel to be the best overall solution.
comfortable.
Okay, and Councillor Cullen next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Hammond. Just for the people that might be tuning in at home, this is kind of that CSI stuff that we think that we're covered by, but we really aren't. Like if you were out somewhere and you just think the satellite kind of beams in and hits you and then they send the rescue team or whatever, but this actually puts us into that position. So is that right? Like sometimes, like a lot of times when we talk to our police and we talk to our fire department, if you were to break your arm out in the Brandon Hills, you might have a tough time having somebody like figure out exactly where you are if you're out in the middle of the bush somewhere. So this helps out. So value to our 911 service, no doubt.
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen, absolutely. The part of our job when a call comes in is we have to verify. So if you're out kayaking and you have a mishap and we have to go find you, then yes, even though you're calling in on a cell phone, we have a pretty tight range in where we think you are. But of course, we will ask you to verify your location if you can. That's all part of the process. I mean, we don't, the technology, at the end of the day, what it does is it shortens the amount of time that we're deploying resources to come and help you when you need help. If you can imagine in the olden days, I mean, this technology didn't exist. So a lot of time was spent verifying locations, verifying where you actually think you are, what your issue is, and then deploying resources. With this technology, yes, it's very CIS-ish. It definitely makes things go a lot quicker at the end of the day.
Just a follow-up question too. If my memory serves me correct, the most common problem with 911 is cell phones that have been removed from service but are still activated because 911 always carries them as being active. So when the kids play in the junk drawer as such, if they hit 911, that actually registers. So this should be able to help out as far as like being able to call back or whatever to that piece. Do you see that any advantage there, or for that matter, like reduce prank calls? Like, I mean, now you're pretty much, we know who you are, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen. So I should clarify, with this replacement software, I mean, we have this ability to do this now. We're just going to be using a different vendor to provide that service. But yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very good point, if I may say that. So yes, even deactivated cell phones that don't have a contract still have the ability to dial 911. So that's a great feature. If you have an old cell phone that you're not using anymore, throw it in your car, keep it charged, and if nothing else, you can use that to dial 911 if you have an emergency. But at the same time, don't give that old cell phone to your kids to play with, because if they accidentally dial 911, then that's taking up time and resources on our end to resolve that issue. So with our process, if a call comes in, we have to follow up on it. So yes, if you accidentally pocket dial 911 or your kid accidentally dials 911, yes, we call back, we verify that it was an accident and that nothing's going on.
Okay, do we have any other hands up? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hammond. Back to the main motion. Any other discussion? Certainly a very mission-critical piece of technology that we absolutely have to have, and certainly the entire province of Manitoba outside the city of Winnipeg are relying on us to have it. Any further discussion? If not, mover can close if he likes.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think that's good. Mr. Hammond explained things quite well.
Good. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Request for a resolution for the application to the provincial government for the stone fence restoration grant.
Charlie.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that the City of Brandon make an application to the Manitoba Sport, Culture and Heritage for a grant under the Designated Heritage Buildings Grant Program for an amount of up to $30,000 for the purpose of restoring a portion of the Stone Fence Municipal Heritage Site.
And
that we, the Council of the City of Brandon, guarantee that there are adequate funds available to complete the project and to continue to maintain the structure.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cullen. Who wishes to speak?
Thank you. Through your worship, just a little bit of background. We agreed to repair or to do the stone fence reparation in stages, or in phases rather, to ensure that costs would be in line. The first phase came in well under what we anticipated would be the costs, and so Council was presented with some information from Andrew Mock of Planning that the Municipal Heritage Committee wanted to go ahead with the reparation of the rest of the stone fence, which does have heritage designation rather in the city. So this is an opportunity that presents to Council and to the city to perhaps receive some funding from the province to help offset those costs.
Okay. Seconder wish to speak? Councillor Cullen?
Yes, Your Worship. Just again, where this particular motion that we have in application in front of us is just to apply for additional funding to help us out with this, so that we're not relying totally on the burden of the taxpayers, the ratepayers of Brandon, Manitoba. So again, there are municipal heritage pools of money that we can use, so we should be doing exactly what we're doing, which is applying for help when it comes to this type of project. So,
yeah. Any other speakers? Seeing none, does the move wish close? Okay, good. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7203, which is an amendment to the fee schedule bylaw regarding ambulance services.
Second reading be in order. Councillor Brown.
Bylaw number 7203 to amend fee schedule. Bylaw number 7196 with respect to fees for ambulance services to be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Fawcett. You know, I don't know how we managed not to put this last on the agenda, but we do have representatives of the fire service here that could answer questions if there are any, and or our people that write our bylaws. I don't know if council's good with this or if we need some highlights. Councillor Fawcett.
Your Worship, I certainly will need some highlights. He's here. Let's bring him up.
That's right.
But more or less, just to get back on it, we held. We're just looking at the fees because at the time of the budget, we didn't know exactly what the fees were going to be. More or less, right?
Deputy Scott McDonald, yes. Welcome.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, that's correct. When we're setting our fee guide, it doesn't necessarily align with the budget of the provinces. We work on a calendar year. They work from an April to a March timeline. So our processes of setting our fee guide and getting the information from them doesn't always align.
So through that, Your Worship, Mr. McDonald, I shouldn't say Mr. McDonald today. That's fine. Oh, yeah, it's not. You're going to come after me. But it does sound like Prairie Mountain Health has said that they're holding fees the same as last year. Is that the impression we're under?
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, yes, that's correct. They are holding them at the 2017 rates, and that's what they'll be moving forward with the 2018 year.
Thank you. Any other questions of Deputy McDonald while he's up? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad we didn't have to keep you here till midnight this time. Any other discussion? Call for the question on second reading then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And third reading is in order. Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Let the bylaw be read a third and final time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. And again, that being third reading, a recorded vote would be in order. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7204, which is an amendment to bylaw number 7171 to change the name of the street located south of Braycrest Drive in the Summit from Summit Way to Valcourt Way.
Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship. That bylaw number 7204 to amend bylaw number 7171 to rename the street in the Summit development located south of Braycrest Drive and east of 18th Street from Summit Way to Valcourt Way be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Parker. Whoever wishes to speak.
Thank you, through your worship. This is a situation where Summit Way, because it is on the summit of the city up there, and it's going to be changed to Valcourt Way, who was a sort of a major participant in the work that development company had done over a number of years, and in his passing they were recognizing him in this way. But it also is it's the only street, so it's not that it's in our city we have sort of collections of streets that are all with the W's. There's the Wheat King area, there's Cougar and Fox. This is one road, so it isn't sort of in
a theme. Yeah. Okay. Seconder wish to speak? Councillor Parker?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll call for the question then on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading would be in order.
Thank you, through your worship, that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Parker. Any discussion? Again, call for the question, recorded vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Next item, please.
Also under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7205, which is an amendment to the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council bylaw to adjust the membership.
Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that bylaw number 7205 to amend bylaw number 6988 with respect to membership of the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Fawcett. Mover wish to speak?
Through your worship, I'd be happy to, but seeing how Mr. Gobey is still sticking around and we haven't heard from him today, we might as well give him an opportunity to hit the podium.
We'll bring him up on this one.
Welcome to Jason Gobey, Executive Director, or Aboriginal Coordinator, whatever we call you, of Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council. Just to maybe provide a few highlights of what the changes are in the bylaw.
Through your worship, the changes in the amendments we're looking at the current bylaw with the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council at this moment is to add an additional seat to the council that's representative of the Brandon School Division administration. At the current standpoint, we have been represented by a board member of the Brandon School Division. And some of the discussions that came from that, and with our involvement with our new superintendent with the school division, was looking at the developments of their own committee work and their own work that they were doing in advisory. The Brandon School Division for a number of years were holding an Indigenous Education Advisory Council and a committee to look at investments within the school and investments within the students' education and the processes. There was very little turnout to a lot of those meetings over the last couple of years. And one of the new ways that the Brandon School Division found that they were getting a lot more succession in their planning was actually meeting with the members of the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council and working through partnership on public consultation and really engaging our community in coming out and voicing their opinion. Those were the reasons as to why Dr. Mark Cassavant wanted to have some changes made and approached the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council to see if an option of having an amendment to the bylaw could be made, whereas now is why we are here today. And now looking at not only just having one seat represented by the Brandon School Division Board, but two seats now, one from the board and one from administration.
Very good. Any questions of Jason while he's up? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for your involvement with the Gambler First Nation work that we've done, Jason. I'm totally convinced that the existence and the work of our BOOPAC has certainly contributed to the success of attracting that First Nation to Brandon for some economic development. So again, I think we're really on the right track in Brandon, and a lot to do with the work of BOOPAC. So thank you very much. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Anything more you had, Councillor Desjardins?
Briefly, Your Worship, Dr. Casabant has shown himself to be a strong advocate for Indigenous students and to improve their outcomes, and he's been to a number of our meetings, and his insight and involvement on BUPAC is supported by everybody that sits on the council.
Good to hear. Okay, we'll call for the question then on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading would be in order.
Thank you. I move that, through Your Worship, I move that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Fawcett. Any discussion? Again, third reading, recorded vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Next item, please.
Giving up notice, Your Worship?
Any giving of notice this evening? And seeing none. Next item, please.
To adjourn would be in order, Your
By
Worship.
Councillor Barry. I don't think we'll get a seconder tonight. It's usually Councillor Chaboy. Councillor Cullen, way to fill in. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Good meeting. We're over here.